All right, all right, all right. Welcome, all explorers near and far. You are now watching the Geo Show. And today's Geo Show is titled Natural Wonders of Southern Mexico. All right, today's show is brought to you by Learn Around the World, and we're going to kick off today's show with a geo survey. So survey questions. Don't worry if you're not logged in yet. You will get an opportunity throughout the show to get logged in, but the game pin is right at the top of your screen. It's 809150. Just again, go to kahoot.it on any device. We're going to go ahead and test those Kahoot devices out and go ahead and have our first survey question for the day. Now, just a reminder, if you've never played Kahoot on the Geo Show before, you only get 10 seconds. That's a real short time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You only get 10 seconds to answer. So let's go ahead and test those out. So go ahead and grab your devices if you're playing along with us, or be ready to yell out the answer to your teacher if you're playing as a classroom. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. Remember, if you're not logged in yet, don't worry. These first couple of questions are just for practice and not worth points. All right, so we are going to Mexico today, but where is Mexico? Do you know? Is it in red, North America, blue, South America, yellow, Europe, or green, Africa? All right, so many of you got it correct. Mexico is in North America and just south of the United States. And we like to say here on the Geo Show that location matters because the Geo Show is a geography-based program. So we're going to go ahead and find out exactly where we're going on our locations for today's virtual field trip. All right, so as we spin our big blue ball around, we again are headed to Mexico. Now, Mexico is a very large country and with many, many, many natural wonders. Unfortunately, we can't talk about all of them in one short virtual field trip, but we are going to visit two states or two locations in southern Mexico. So one is the state of Oaxaca. So Mexico has states just like the United States of America. And Oaxaca, we have a couple of natural wonders we're going to be observing today. One of them is Hierve el Agua, which means boiling water. You'll find out why it gets that name shortly. The other natural wonder in the state of Oaxaca that we'll be referencing today is Árbol del Tule, which is the widest tree in the world. And we are also going to head to the eastern part of southern Mexico, right next to the Caribbean Sea, and we're going to be talking about cenotes. Now, cenotes are kind of a general term used for sinkholes and for underwater river systems. And as we look at from even our satellite image here, these enclosed bodies of water right here are cenotes. So there are many different kinds, and we're going to talk all about cenotes, Hierve el Agua, and Árbol del Tule right here on today's Geo Show. All right, so before we get right into it, we're going to go ahead and introduce our guest classrooms, our guest explorers that are on the show with us today, and give random shout outs. So our first random shout out today goes to Jefferson International Academy over in Michigan. So shout out to all of you guys. First up, we have Mr. Clayton's 4th to 6th graders from Victorville, California. Welcome to the show, guys. All right, and do we have any volunteers there to share a fun fact about Mexico or any natural wonders found there?
We sure do.
The 2005 horror movie The Cave was filmed in a cenote in Hill World Cenote Park, Quintana Roo, Mexico.
Awesome. Great fun fact. I did not even know that. So it makes sense. You guys are going to see it. The cenotes are really beautiful, and there's many different kinds. And so it would make sense. It's perfect, especially for a movie that takes place in a cave. And you'll find out why shortly. Our next random shout out today is going to Southeast Polk Schools in Iowa. Shout out to all of you guys in Iowa. And next, I would like to introduce Mrs. Belaski's 5th graders from Canton, Ohio. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi. Hi.
All right, and do we have any fun fact presenters from Canton today?
We have many. Okay, let's go. Fun fact. Start. Just stand up there.
Okay. So I got a natural wonder, and it's Cuatro Cienega, and it's in the desert, and it's like made up of springs, so that there's like rivers and pools in the desert.
Awesome. So we're gonna Yerve el Agua is probably a little bit different from that one, but kind of similar in that it's in a really dry area in Oaxaca, and we'll kind of see that water that's coming up there. So great fun fact there. And also like to give a big old shout out to Nuevo Continente schools in Mexico. So shout out to all of you down in Mexico watching. They're from northern Mexico, so we get to take them to southern Mexico today as well. That's awesome. And I'm going to introduce our last on-camera guest with us today. So Mrs. Collier's fourth graders from Columbus, Ohio. Welcome to the show, guys. Wow, they are excited, I tell you what. And do we have any fun facts in Columbus today?
To Mayanos centos were sacred portals to speak with the gods.
Oh, great. So little ritual areas. And what we'll find out later on is our cenotes as well were used with some rituals and celebrations for the Mayans. So we're going to find out all about those. Thank you everyone for sharing your research and fun facts. If you're out there and you're not on camera with us today and you have researched fun facts that you would like to share with all the explorers around the world, remember, go do that at Flipgrid. I would love to check them out, learn from you guys. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. And today is a choose your own adventure show. So that means you get to decide what we talk about first. And to do that, we're going to use Kahoot. So go ahead and grab your devices if you're playing along with us. And we're jumping right into it. Again, this is not worth points, so you have time to get logged in. That game pin is always at the bottom left hand of your screen, 809150 today. All right, explorers, what do you want to learn about first? Red, cenotes, blue, Yerve el Agua, or yellow, Arbol del Tule. All right, so we have the most votes for cenotes, so we're going to start off today's virtual field trip talking about cenotes. All right, so to talk about cenotes, first we're going to learn that there's 3 different kinds. So there's 3 styles. The first one is open, the second one is semi-closed, and the third one is a closed cenote. So an open cenote is just how it sounds. It means it's open to the air. So it's a sinkhole or cave that is filled with water, and it's open to the outside environment. And this is an example of an open cenote. This one is located near Chichen Itza, so we were just learning that natural wonders have been used for rituals and religious purposes, not only in Mexico, but all over the world. And surely that has happened here as well. Same thing with this cenote that we're looking at. This is a classic example of an open cenote. You can see it's filled up with water right here. And right across the way, you can kind of see all of these holes in the wall of the rock. So this is very important because most of the rock found in this area of the world is called limestone. What kind of rock is it?
Limestone!
All right, so limestone is a sedimentary rock. And generally, not all limestone, but a lot of limestone is made up of calcium carbonate. So big word there, but basically that is the old crushed up seashells and coral that used to be at the bottom of the ocean. And over time, each one of these little bitty bits and grains of crushed up seashells and coral have gotten pressed together and formed rock. And most of that calcium actually dissolves in water. So what happens is when you get water in this limestone, it kind of eats out underwater caves, big sinkholes like we see here. And that's going to be a big important discussion topic today, that calcium and how it dissolves in water. So our next type is called a semi-closed cenote. So this would be kind of like right here where you have most of it is in an underground cave or covered scenario, but there is an opening to that. So part of it is open to the air or the outside world. And the third type is a closed cenote, meaning it's underground, so like an underground cave. And we're going to see examples of all three of those. And we are going to head to the Yucatan Peninsula. So if I come back out, just so you know what we're talking about here. So the bodies of water we're talking about today are the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, all right? So the Yucatan Peninsula. So this entire peninsula is just filled up with limestone, and most of that limestone has all kinds of underwater caves and passageways that have been eaten out by the water over the years. So when we look at the Yucatan Peninsula, most of the cenotes that we're going to talk about today are located in this area. So this area is called the Maya Rivera. Maya Rivera. About half of all cenotes are found in this location, the eastern part of the peninsula. There's around 2,000 or so found here. But there are many other ones that are found in the upper part of the peninsula. And these have a pretty interesting theory to how these got created. So a meteor hit in the Gulf of Mexico a long, long time ago, and almost in a perfect semicircle right here is the blast zone. So from where that meteor hit, there are many people that believe that many of the open cenotes found almost in this perfect semicircle throughout the upper Yucatan is from the rocks that got blasted through the air from this meteor that hit the earth and landed in this perfect semicircle. Now these big heavy rocks were sitting on top of that soft limestone, and over the years the water ate out from under it and made those open cenotes. All right, so a couple of vocabulary words before we jump in the water and explore under the caves. We are going to learn a couple of vocabulary words. So our first one today is stalactite. Can you guys say stalactite? All right, so the way this works, so remember I talked about that calcium carbonate earlier? Well, calcium, just think of it as like sugar or Kool-Aid. If you make Kool-Aid, right? Everyone loves it. You put the packet of Kool-Aid in the water, mix it around, and that Kool-Aid dissolves into the water. Well, the same thing happens here, but instead of a Kool-Aid packet, it's actual rock. So what happens is when it rains above ground and that water drips through the ground, well, it dissolves calcium out of the limestone. And what happens is underground in a cave, when that water drips from the ceiling, sometimes it leaves behind some of that calcium, and it kind of forms something that looks like an icicle. And just how an icicle will grow longer and longer and longer with water dripping down it, same idea here, except for frozen water, we have hard rock. So we're leaving behind little bits of calcium as the water drips, and it gets longer and longer and longer. Again, this is called a stalactite. Now, when it drips on the ground, it actually makes a formation that is going upwards because the water drips on the ground, and when the water droplet hits the ground, it leaves a little bit of calcium there, and that calcium builds upwards instead of down. This is called a stalagmite. Can you all say stalagmite? All right, so these words sound really similar to each other, but I'm going to tell you the trick that I use to tell the difference between the two. So I think of a little bug. So I see this word right here, mite, and I think of bugs and mites. And when I think of bugs crawling around on the ground. So that's how I tell the two apart. So a stalagmite is a rock formation that is forming from the ground, and a stalactite is forming from the roof of the cave or from the top of the cave. And then over a long, long period of time, after lots and lots and lots and lots of dripping of water, these two, the stalactite and the stalagmite under it, will actually meet in the middle, and it will form a formation called a column. All right, so what is this formation called? All right, so those are your three vocabulary words that we're going to talk about today as we check out our caves. So let's get to it. So we're going to jump in the water and explore an open cenote first. So I hope everyone brought their bathing suits today. All right, this cenote is actually, this is located near Tulum in Mexico. And this is actually right near the coast. So this is actually salt water that's filling up this open cenote. Now, this has a really interesting significance or importance for the environment because it does have salt water in it. Then lots of young ocean fish come here to grow up. So it serves as a nursery. So cenotes are very important for juvenile fish that come here to grow up. When they get bigger, they'll go back into the ocean. Now you may ask yourself, well, how are they getting back and forth between the ocean and a cenote? Remember that limestone is, it has all kinds of underwater caves and openings that are connecting either two cenotes, or in this case, the cenote connected to the ocean. What's really cool, all these funky roots that you see hanging down, these come from a very special tree called a mangrove. In this case, it's a red mangrove. And mangrove is a general term given to any tree or shrub that is saltwater tolerant. So most, these are living organisms, and they don't like salt water, just like you don't like to drink salt water, but they have a unique adaptation where they can actually filter out some of that salt. Now, what's really unique here is that's cool, see me swimming backwards. All right, so right here is we see lots of big rocks and large boulders at the bottom of this open cenote. Well, at one time, this was most likely a closed cenote with a underwater cave system here. But what happens is, when that water eats away at that rock, that limestone, well, the top, if it gets too heavy, will actually fall in and collapse in on itself. So you see all kinds of fish here, and again, they grow up in the roots of these mangrove trees. These, again, are red mangrove trees, very important trees for juvenile fish. You can see how they're protected in those roots, so large animals it's hard to get to them. Now, not only fish that love coming to open cenotes, but also people. And people come here not only to see fish and enjoy the natural environment, and birds come here to feed on those juvenile fish, but also people come here to practice scuba diving. So scuba diving is an activity people like to do in the open ocean. Well, they also come here to learn before going out into the open ocean. So open cenotes are really nice because there's like a pool. So it's a closed environment. There's not a lot of wave action or anything like that, even though this is connected to the ocean underground. And also, as we're going to see in our next cenote, is that when it's a closed cenote or semi-closed cenote, often you are scuba diving underwater in caves. And cave diving is one of the most dangerous types of scuba diving that you can do. And so people will come here to practice in the open cenotes before they go to the cave or the closed cenotes. All right, there's some of our scuba divers that are diving. They are practicing, you scuba dive with partners, so you're always safe and you have help if something goes wrong. And that's why you generally see them in pairs. Okay, so that's just a brief look at an open cenote. Now we're going to go to a different location here in the Yucatan. So this is a very famous cenote called Dos Ojos. And if you guys are taking Spanish or you have before, you may recognize ojos means eyes. So dos is two, so two eyes. And the reason it's called two eyes, we just see a map of the water of the cave system. But over here to the right, if you were to fly over this forest, it would look like two openings over here into the treetops. And that's why it's called Dos Ojos. It looks like two eyes from above. What we're going to do is we're going to enter this semi-closed cenote. Up here on the right, we're going to swim around, check out some of the rock formations in the cenotes, and we're going to go underwater and swim into this area. So this is called the Bat Cave. I'll circle it for you, and I'll let you make some guesses of why it's called the Bat Cave. And right here in the middle, you see some wooden or squares that are drawn on this map. These are like just like little docks or wooden areas you can get out of the water, take a rest on. But I'm going to point that one out in the Bat Cave because we'll see something interesting there. All right, so let's check out the open and closed cenote of Dos Ojos. All right, so this is at the entrance. You can see why it's a semi-closed cenote. As we pan around into the cave, we're going to go ahead and jump in the water. Now, unlike our last cenote, this is actually fresh water. So this is not salt water. So any life that you see in this water, any fish that you see are freshwater fish, not saltwater fish. So a little bit different than our last one. Also, because it is a closed cenote or semi-closed cenote, both of them actually. It's very dark in here, so we have to use flashlights. So when we go underwater, try to keep your eye on the lights. And as we see our first fish there, again, this is a freshwater fish that live here. And here we get to see that rock formation that is dripping down or forming from the top of the ceiling to the bottom. And does anyone remember what the formation is called when it's coming from the roof down, forming from the roof down? And let's see, let's go over to Mrs. Pulaski's class. Do you guys have a guess?
I think you just say it from here.
Stalagmite.
Right, stalactite. Great, stalactite. And remember, if it's forming from the ground up, it's stalagmite. Now, how is water dripping underwater? So this formation is actually underwater now. So do we have any guesses? Let's go over to California. Do you guys have any guesses of why a stalactite would form underwater? Water doesn't drip underwater. Do you guys have any guesses there?
It maybe happens with the salt water, like if salt water goes in there.
Okay, this one is all fresh water, so it's no salt water. This one's actually inland a little bit more. And I'll help you out. Maybe right now it's underwater, but at one time it wasn't underwater. So it would have dripped from the ceiling. This formation would have formed when it was a dry cave. Now it's a wet cave, it's underwater. All right, so we're going to keep swimming and head around and back towards the Bat Cave. Again, if anytime we come out of the water, you can see what I was talking about, the newer stalactites that are forming from the roof of the cave. Now we're going to come across some scuba divers on the way back to the Bat Cave. And remember, many scuba divers go to those open cenotes to practice, to learn how they come to these closed environments, these semi-closed cenotes. And there was a rock formation there where the stalactite was connected to the stalagmites. And who remembers what that formation is called over in Columbus? Do we have any guesses there?
Column.
A column, right. So when they connect, they form a column. Great, you guys are doing wonderful. And as we swim back, and here we have met or run into a group of scuba divers. Right, you can kind of hear their regulators breathing in and out. But right here, this is really interesting with the sport of cave scuba diving. So it's kind of hard to see, but I'm going to try to get a good spot right here. Does anyone see, you guys see this line right here that the light is lighting up right here? It's basically a piece of string. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Right. So the way that you navigate underwater in a cave when you're scuba diving is sometimes it's so dark. Now we're lucky here because the water's so clear, we can actually see with a flashlight. But a lot of caves are the water is so murky and muddy, you can't even see in front of your face. So how do you navigate? Well, they practice by using a string. So once someone maps out the cave, they will install or put these strings. And what you do when you're swimming around, if everyone makes an OK sign with your hand, if you make an OK sign, what you do is you put that OK, the O of the OK, around that string. And if you always keep your pointer finger connected to your thumb, you never let go of that OK, then you'll never get lost, because that string will always be in between your fingers. And that's how you navigate when you're cave diving, or one of the ways, I should say. All right, so we're going to go through some rock formations here and go back to that bat cave that we were talking about earlier. So this is a closed cenote. Now you do see in the top there is one small opening up there, but this is still considered a closed cenote. And as we pan across, follow along the roof of the cave with the lights. And do you guys see why this is called the Bat Cave?
Yeah. Oh boy.
All right, so there are many bats flying around in here. Now these aren't, you know, bats that would hurt you. These are actually fruit bats. So what they do is they fly in and out of that opening up there, and they bring fruit back in here. And when they eat, sometimes they drop food in the water. Also, they drop other stuff. Now, does anyone know what bat droppings are called? Let's go over to Columbus first this time. Does anyone know what the name of bat droppings are?
Scat?
Scat? That's a good guess. It's actually called guano. Can you guys say guano?
Guano!
All right, so if you look here, right on this is that wooden dock that's built right in the middle of the bat cave. And as I pan across, you guys see, does anyone see what's down there on the right? Do you guys see that in California?
Yes!
What is that? What is that right there? Does anyone know? A snorkel. It's a snorkel. And what do you do with that piece of the snorkel right there?
You breathe.
You breathe underwater with
You
it.
do. Well, this is a snorkel, so yeah. So, but you put this piece of the snorkel in your mouth. Where's that snorkel sitting on top of right now?
The Bat Cave.
Bat droppings. So, you know, you're all welcome, guys, because, you know, when I took the camera out to take these shots under here, I accidentally put my snorkel on top of bat guano. That's right. You can say ew. All right. But luckily, you know, I'm still here today, so nothing went wrong. So as we keep swimming around and we look, this is at the bottom of the water. And we're going to see there's leftover pieces of fruit and also bat dropping or guano that we find in the water. And that's important because of life that we find under here. So this is a freshwater fish. And where do they get food from? Well, they have a relationship with these bats. We call this a symbiotic relationship. Can you guys say symbiotic?
Yeah.
All right, so there's different forms of symbiotic relationships, but basically what it means is two living organisms, in this case the bat and the fish, and one can help the other one can hurt the other one, or sometimes they don't even care. But in this case, the bats don't care about the fish, but they are helping out the fish, because when they drop food and guano, the fish actually eat that, and that's what the fish live off of. So the fish would not be able to survive without those bats. How cool is that? That's called a symbiotic relationship. All right, and this is Dos Ojos cenotes. And a couple of cool fun facts about Dos Ojos as we exit the cave. This is one of the longest underwater cave systems in the world. It's actually somewhere around 198 miles long. And that is, they're often finding new connections to connect it to other caves that actually keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. And in fact, many of the closed cenotes found right here in southern Mexico make up some of the longest underwater caves in the world. And at its deepest point, Dos Ojos is 391 feet deep. So it gets rather deep. The portion we're in right now at its deepest, right here where we saw the scuba divers earlier, that was only around 33 feet deep. and that's dos ojos. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pause right here, opening up the floor for some questions. And that means if you're outside, we would love to make this an interactive experience for you as well if you're off camera. So make sure you text in those questions either right here on Zoom or to hashtag GEOshow. We're going to start, though, with Mrs. Belaski's classroom. And do we have a question over in Ohio from you about cenotes?
All right, we've got one.
Do cenotes fill up by rain or by a different resource that gives water?
Right, so both would be the answer. Remember the first one that we saw? That one was connected to the ocean. So that salt water is coming from the ocean, whereas, say, dos ojos would be all groundwater. So that, yes, that would be a combination of rain. Any water that's filling up in that water table would be filling up there. So great. Let's go over to California, to Mr. Clayton's classroom. Do you guys have a question for us?
Do you know they're stuck in ships and they're stuck in motorcycles?
Are there sunken ships or motorcycles?
So I did not find any in Dos Ojos. Now, Dos Ojos is a very popular scuba diving cenote and snorkeling cenote. So I imagine even if there was some leftover, I don't know, bicycles or anything that someone had thrown in there over the past has been removed if they were there. I'm going to answer it this way. We're going to go even further back and talk about the Mayans. So the Mayans that lived in this part of the world and still do, they still live in this part of the world, but when they had their really big civilizations and cities like Chichen Itza, then they would use some of these cenotes for religious rituals, sometimes sacrifices. So all kinds of things have been found at the bottom of some of these cenotes. Human remains, animal remains, and also objects as well. So great question there. And last but not least, let's head over to Columbus. Do you guys have a question for us there?
How do the cenotes get so deep?
Okay, so you remember earlier we were talking about, I was talking about dissolving rock into water. And if you remember that, just like you can take sugar and dissolve sugar or salt or anything that's dissolvable into water, well, you can do that with rock as well, with some rock. And limestone is one of those rocks. And specifically the calcium carbonate in those rocks will get dissolved by water. So water is what, over a long, long period of time, eats out all of those caves underground. So underwater river systems makes those caves, makes those cenotes. All right, great questions coming from all around. I do just see a lot of pictures posting. Don't see any questions over on Twitter. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our next topic. So you guys get to vote again. So go ahead and check out your devices if you are playing with us on Kahoot. And our next Choose Your Own Adventure question is coming in 3, 2, 1. What do you want to learn about next? Now don't pick cenotes because we just talked about it. All right, so would you like to talk about red, arbol del tule, or blue, hierve el agua? All right, so you have chosen hierve el agua, which translates to boiling water. So we'll find out why it's called boiling water. Okay, so what we're going to look at when we get to hierve el agua is we are going to look at a cliff. And the cliff, the top of the cliff is in white, and this brown shaded area is the bottom of the cliff. And so just to point out a couple of things before we look at it, on my diagram here, these little stars, this is where water is bubbling up out of the ground on the top of the cliff. And this is where this location gets its name, hierve el agua. And when that water bubbles up, some of it gets trapped in some pools. Some pools are man-made, some pools are natural. And then the water that does not stay in the pools actually go over this side of the cliff. Now, just like we just learned how stalactites were formed inside caves underground in columns and stalagmites, same thing here. We're going to see some pretty cool rock formations on the edge of this cliff that were formed from water that has calcium in it. When the water dries out or leaves, it leaves the calcium behind, and that calcium gets hard and makes a pretty cool rock formation. So that's what you're going to look at. And let's go ahead to the western parts of southern Mexico, to the state of Oaxaca. All right, and as we're driving along here, you can see it's kind of a dry area in this region, and we're going through a gate here as a local farmer is walking by, and this is actually a privately owned area. So this is kind of like if you go to a national park and you pay for a park pass at the gate, the same idea right there. So we're paying for entrance to the location, and this is Yerve el Agua. So as we pan around, so remember, I'll freeze it right there. Remember I talked about that water, how it bubbles up out of the ground, and when it trickles down the edge of the cliff or the side of the cliff, it leaves behind calcium and other minerals that it has dissolved. So when that water evaporates up, then it leaves behind that calcium that does not evaporate like the water does. And it gets hard and it makes these cool rock formations. Now it looks like a frozen waterfall, but it's not frozen water. It's actually kind of warm in this area of the world. All right, let's get a couple close-up shots of these formations on the side of the cliff. Now this is on top of the cliff, and we'll check out where some of these springs are coming up out of the ground. And some of these pools. Now remember I said some of these are man-made, some of these are natural. These big ones are man-made. We'll point those out in a minute. But here you can see why this area has this name, boiling water. You can see it bubbling up out of the ground. Now, here's a fun fact though. The water is not warm at all. It's actually quite cool. And it only has the appearance of boiling. Instead, it is quite cool, but it's bubbling up because it's coming up out of the ground. So we're on top of that the first formation that I showed you. This is another one that's right near the big formation that I showed you at the beginning. And you can see that one is quite unique. With the background, it really does look like a frozen waterfall in the middle of a desert type environment. So again, when you look at this water, that water right there has dissolved calcium in it. So it's kind of like, you know, again, I come back to the Kool-Aid. Instead of having red Kool-Aid, just imagine that it was just colorless. Instead, that Kool-Aid is there. In this case, it's not Kool-Aid mix. It is calcium, and it's in that water. So what happens is, when that water runs and trickles down, it leaves behind some of the calcium that deposits and turns into hard rock. And what happens here, this is actually a man-made pool. And so people actually, you know, use cinder block or brick and actually made a wall right here. But it looks natural because calcium has deposited on the side of that wall, and it looks like rock formation, but it's actually a man-made wall right there. All the small ones that you see on the ground, all of those are natural, smaller natural pools. And as we pan across, you'll get a big sweeping shot of this area and Yerve el Agua. All right, so again, some of these pools are man-made. So we can see right here, this wall right here, it looks nice and big and flat and tall. This is an entirely man-made wall, but it has the appearance of looking natural because the calcium has actually deposited and built up on the side of the man-made wall. So this is kind of a cool effect. These are, if those big pools were not put there by men or people, I should say, then this is what the whole area would look like. It's more typical for the natural pools to be these little small pools, and not these big gigantic ones that people could get in and out of. And as it trickles down the side of the cliff, it will also leave deposits of calcium on the sides as well, and that's what makes these big kind of frozen waterfall looking formations. Now, there's no hand railings or anything in this area, so be careful when you explore around. And as we get a nice back away shot or a far shot, you can see beautiful, the different colors would be different minerals coming out, and sometimes it's where the dry rock versus the wet rock. The wet, it looks a little bit darker from far away. And as you can see, lots of people come to this area to enjoy the cool springs. All right, so let's go ahead and pause right there and open up a round of questions. And this time we'll start with Mrs. Collier's class. Let's go over to Columbus, and do you guys have a question for us?
Is there any animals that live in the springs?
I did not see any that lived in the springs, and there were so many people there that I don't think that they would want to, because there were so many tourists there. And actually, I don't know if you noticed, but all the people that were wearing the white coats, they were like a local college or university that were taking like pictures. I don't know if they were graduation pictures or what kind of pictures. I didn't go up and ask, but they were taking some type of group pictures up there. So it's definitely a famous spot to come to. So if I were an animal, I definitely would not choose to live there. Great question. Let's go over to Mrs. Balaski's classroom.
All right,
Do you guys have another question for us?
How much calcium is in the water in Yerba Agua?
Right, so I did not do any kind of measuring, but it's nothing too noticeably. So it's like you don't see a lot of floatings or any kind of things floating around in there necessarily. It just kind of looks a little cloudy, the water. But so that's one I don't know how to answer or give you an accurate answer of how much calcium is in there. But great question. Let's go over to California, Mr. Clayton's classroom.
Are these found only in Mexico?
Oh,
These types of
Formations, yes.
formations? I would have to guess no, because basically it's just a spring at the top of a cliff that is leaving deposits of calcium. So it dissolves that calcium under the ground when it's going through underwater caves. It's groundwater, and then when it bubbles up into the spring and the water evaporates on top of the land, it leaves behind the calcium. So I imagine, or I would have to assume, that there are other places similar around the world to the same, that has some type of similar formations. Now, in this particular case, it's a hot, dry areas surrounding this place. So I don't know if any look exactly like this. It looks quite unique to me. I've never seen a place personally like this as well. All right, so we're going to jump right into just show you really quickly the widest tree in the world, Arbol del Tule. And Arbol del Tule is, again, it's the widest tree in the world. It's not the tallest. It's not the biggest, if you included how tall it was and wide and all that good jazz. But it is the widest tree in the world. And if we take a look here, this is the plaque that's right beside it. Now, it's not completely accurate. Some people estimate it's younger or older, but the date that they have on the plaque beside the tree is 2,000 years old. And so some say it's older, some say it's a little less, but regardless, it's still very old tree. How tall is it? It is 58 meters, or circumference, sorry. It's 58 meters around. So if you walked all the way around the tree, it would be 190 feet. It's 42 meters tall, or 137 feet tall. And so I said it's the widest, and you measure that by the diameter, and the diameter is a little over 14 meters diameter, which is 45 feet. And that is the stats for Arbo del Tule. Now, I took this shot with a wide lens camera. I could not even get the entire tree trunk in one camera shot. So that's why it kind of looks rounded. And so this was with the regular lens. You can see I only get about half of the tree trunk in the shot with a camera. And as you look up into the limbs, this is a cypress tree, and it is a type of coniferous tree. So it's an evergreen. You can see here's some up close shots of its cones. So it's coniferous trees drop cones. And so that would be a common example would be like a pine tree, right? Right, you hear how loud it is. Lots of birds hang out in the tree. And you can see some sprinklers going. So it's a water cypress. So originally this area was marshland that was drained by the Spanish and turned into farmland. And so you can see the railings around the tree, so you keep people off of the ground, because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but if you have a lot of people that go around one tree, you can actually squish the ground enough. So it's called compacting the soil. You can actually squish the roots and kill a tree with too many people coming to see it. So you actually have to stay on the concrete around the railings, and when you come and visit Arbo del Tule, which is the widest tree in the world. Get a nice shot going up there. Again, it is 45 feet in diameter. All right, so we are just a little over 45. So what we're going to do is, if you have questions about Arbo del Tule or anything that we've seen or talked about today, hold on to them. We'll come back after Geo Quiz if you have time to hang around with us, and we'll get to as many and all of your questions that we can in a lightning round. But right now we're going to go ahead and play our Geo Quiz for our classrooms that need to run on with their day. All right, so don't forget to get logged in, because all questions are worth points from here on out. So if you look at the bottom of your screen there again, that game pin today is 809150. Again, 809150. And here we go. So the first question is, what is the name of the cave formation that drips down from the top of the ceiling? Is coming from the top of the ceiling. Is that red a column, blue stalagmite, or yellow stalactites? All right, so it is stalactites. All right, great job for everyone. All right, right off the bat, Evan is in the lead. Great job, Evan. Next question coming up. How old is the tree? Tule. Is it red 2,000 years old, blue 1,000 years old, yellow 200 years old, or green 100 years old? All right, it is 2,000 years old, and Evan's still in the lead. Logan takes second. Great job, guys. Next question. Is the boiling water at Yerve El Agua really hot? Yes, red, no, blue. All right, so Isaac takes the lead, and Kaylee's now in second. Great job. Next question. What kinds of cenotes are there? Red, semi-closed, blue, open, yellow, closed, or green, open, closed, and semi-closed cenotes? All right, so it's green, all of these, and Theon is in the lead now. Next question. Which Mexico state is Yerve El Agua and Arbo del Tule in? Is it red, Oaxaca, blue, Yucatan, yellow, Chihuahua, or green, Chiapas? All right. All right, so it is in Oaxaca, and today's winner is Nathan Cruz. Great job, Nathan Cruz. All right, so if you are Nathan Cruz's teacher, make sure you send me your school address so I can send you your snail mail. Snail mail does not work without an address, and you can only do that in one place and one place only this year, and that is at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize right there at the bottom of your screen. And if you get it in quickly today, postcards go out on Wednesdays, and I can get it to you very quickly. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump to all of your questions as quickly as we can in lightning round fashion. So if you have lots of them, get your students lined up, and we'll get to as many as we can. We're going to start in Columbus first. Looks like we have one queued up. Go ahead.
Is there any more seeds from the Arbol del Tul seeds so people could grow their own?
Is there any, I didn't catch the first part, I'm sorry.
Is there any from the Arbol del Tul seeds so people could grow their own?
Oh, seeds. Right, so seeds are coming, so it's a coniferous tree. So I showed the picture, they drop the cones. So you can walk around, there's little cones laying all on the ground. So you could certainly just pick those cones up. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take to grow something the size of, I can tell you how long, around 2,000 years to get something the size of Arbol del Tule. And these are water cypress trees, so they like marshy areas, so not like a dry yard like in the case where it's growing now. They do have to have sprinklers and stuff out there to keep it going. All right, let's go over to Mr. Clayton's classroom.
Is it one tree or is it many others?
Yeah, so unlike that, see, there are actually, I'm glad you brought this up. So there are other trees, there are other trees out there that are actually wider than Arbol del Tule, but Arbol del Tule is the widest single trunk tree. So for an example, there are other trees that are actually more than one tree that looks like it's one trunk, but in this case is only one trunk. So it's not two or three of them that are kind of combining together. That's a great question. Let's see, we had a question earlier about Yerve el Agua on our chat. Say, is it slippery? And I didn't find it that slippery on the rocks. Of course, where it's wet, it's a little slippery, but the calcium deposits actually had a rather good grip on them. Let's go back over to California, Mr. Clayton's class. Any other questions?
Yes. How did the tree get so wide?
Get so wide? Yeah. It was lived for a very long time. So yes, it's just an old tree, and I would just have to assume that the conditions are right at this area where it has lived long enough. It's had enough, sunshine, nutrients, all of the above that you need to grow as a tree, or in this case, as a cypress tree. And so it is, and it has a couple of nicknames, so which is interesting enough. A couple of nicknames for Arbol del Tule is, one is Old Man in the Water was a nickname for it, and some people call it the Tree of Life as well. And so it's kind of interesting that this tree right here would have been around when Cortez and the Spanish were when they arrived in Mexico in the 1500s. All right, great question. I don't have any other questions coming in from out there, so if you got more, just keep them coming.
Kevin, you want to ask first?
Oh, wow.
Go ahead.
Who planted the tree?
Who planted the tree? I don't think it was a person who planted the tree. So just like if you go hiking, so for you guys, if you go up, hiking around, I don't know, in the mountains close to you guys, I guess be up around Big Bear or something. If you're hiking around in the woods and you just see a big ponderosa tree in Southern California, it's nature. So how you reproduce as a tree. In this case, the cypress tree, they drop cones. So it would have been, again, the area that this tree, when this tree started growing, would have looked a lot different. It wouldn't be beside a church in a community. It would have been a wet marshland, and when it would have started growing in this area. All right, great.
One of our students wanted to know if it makes syrup. If it's a tree that makes syrup.
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know for fact. I know you make syrup. The trees I know that people make syrup from are maple trees and birch trees. Both of those are deciduous trees. The sap that are in them. Anytime that I've seen a cypress tree, they seem to be kind of. I know these family of trees, like the bark is really dry. I don't know that if you can make syrup from them or not. Is the short answer. I would not think so. I've never heard of anyone making syrup from a cypress or any similar type tree.
Who owns the tree? Who owns the tree?
That's a great question. At this point, I don't know exactly who owns the tree, if it's just the town. So, like, I mean, it's in the center of this small community now. So, I'm going to have to make just a guess and tell you, because it's in the middle of a town, a community. So it'd be just like if you went downtown near your town, and if there was a big famous tree by a courthouse or a church. So it's either certainly going to be the church that it's beside, or it's going to be the town, would be who owns it. And I don't know if anyone really considers themselves as the owner of Arbol del Tule. All right. Great question. I have time for one more if you guys have another question.
I think they wanted to know what the building was next to the tree. Is that
right? It was a church. It was a church. So right next to the tree. And sorry, I should have said that earlier. But yeah. So if I pull it up, I can find it really quickly. But there was a church right beside it, and I actually walked in there. So the predominant religion in Mexico is the Catholic religion, so it was a Catholic church, as the church that was there. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, right here. So this building, you can see the two little bell towers on each side of the church here. And so, yeah, you can, when you visit, you can walk right in and check out that cathedral. So that is Arbol del Tule, and it's just like right around it. So it's hard to see behind it, but right back here is kind of like a little string of buildings, like they're like restaurants. And so it's just a little town, it's a little community, and this is just an open kind of square, like a little park area that is right around the tree and beside the church. All right, so great questions, everyone, and I am actually out of time, so thank you so much for hanging out with us today on today's Geo Show and learning about some of the few natural wonders in southern Mexico, because there are certainly many that we did not have the opportunity to talk about. And until next time, you've been watching Learn Around the World's Geo Show. It's a great big world out there, so keep exploring. Bye, guys.
Chicken!
Bye. Thanks.